Hello and welcome to the Game Dev Local Podcast. I'm your host, Oscar Clark, he, him pronouns. And as you know, I am on a podquest to learn everything you wanted to know about game dev but never dared to ask. And today I'm joined by Alex Moore. Alex, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, I'm Alex Moore. I am he, him. I have been in the games industry for 25, nearly 26 years, which is really quite scary that I've been doing it that long. I started as a level designer a long, long time ago, making Doom maps and then Quake maps, which is still really good fun, and I kind of
Yep.
miss. And then progressed on to full game design, became a lead designer quite early on in the heady days of PlayStation 1 games where, you take a game idea and 6 months later you ship it.
My favourite word. Ship it.
Ship it.
And it is one word.
Yeah, it's one word, and sometimes maybe they needed 9 months rather than six. But anyway,
Yes.
we put out a lot of games at that point, and then obviously moved up through PlayStation 2 and so on, and then moved to Liverpool for a 6 month contract back in 2010. Met my wife and mother of children now, and stayed here and love it. It's a great city.
Yep.
Worked for a company called Firesprite for quite a long time, and then worked for Splash Damage until the start of the year.
Cool. And I have sympathies for that because I started in 98, so I'm like 27 years into this thing. But I didn't join PlayStation until PlayStation 3 era when I worked. For those who don't know, I did do some things with game dev once rather than just talk about it. I was home architect on PlayStation's Virtual World Home. Fantastic kind of like areas. And those who already know me know that I'm obsessed with game design and I like writing on the subject. And I think this is really what I kind of want to explore today. I should also mention I have a certain love for Liverpool. As a child, we used to go to the Isle of Man, and when you went on the Liverpool ferry, there's something about sitting and looking up at the liver birds that just made me know holiday was coming. So hence I've always had a soft spot for the city. Anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about game design. And I think what I hope we're going to get out of this is I'm the commercial designer who thinks at the helicopter top level. I suspect you're much more kind of practical design metric. No, we both do data, I'm sure, but I suspect you're more into the sort of what is that thing that happens there and why. Is that a fair judgment?
Yeah, I guess you start to learn yourself after 25 years, I suppose, or everybody else tells you.
I hope so.
One of the two, not sure. Yeah, I've always been the kind of person that's like, right, how are we going to do that? Let's figure this out.
Yeah.
What are the nuts and bolts, the technical side of it? I like to be given a brief that sounds mostly impossible. Like, can you make a Rainbow Six game in 3 months with two of you? Like, yeah, let's do that. That'll be fun. Can you make a VR game on PlayStation 4 that's procedurally generated levels that somebody else can join into a session on their phone? It's like, no, but we can try. So yeah, so I think
Yeah.
there are generally sort of there's two sort of main tracks I think for sort of like game designers. You're either like pragmatic and very systems focused, I think, like myself, or you're kind of emotional based, and it's all about like the play feelings and how is this player going to go on the journey and so on.
Well, it's interesting you say systems based because in my head, my brain is thinking when I say systems, I think about flow. I think about the sync source process where we have structures and they are emergent properties and that they have consequences. And I'm thinking about that as a system. Whereas I suspect what you're talking about is what I would tend to call mechanical, namely, you have this thing that does. I mean, by the way, I think the reason the languages overlap is because they are the same thing. I think that's the secret. It's just that they're different perspectives, they're different lenses that we apply to the problem. Is that making any sense?
It is. It's also highlighting, I think, one of the things that we struggle with so much in the industry, which is actually defining
Yeah,
what we do.
language.
Yeah, the language. There's uh, years ago, you'd create a little sort of you'd have your art bibles, but you'd have like a little bibliography of like these are the terms. And when we were working on things like Rogue Trooper and so on, then
Yeah,
it was all like the terms from the comic that
yeah,
so anyone could come along and understand what the hell they were reading.
yeah.
But we kind of need that for everything really,
Uh,
because I think we
oh,
do all.
you are talking to somebody who's going to go down a complete tangent very very easily if I don't stop myself. It's actually an area I think is really important and has not happened in games yet, and that's we don't even have a common definition of what a game designer is,
No,
let alone what a game designer does, let alone the language we use. So if you get me started talking about what premium is, premium has a meaning. It's called high price, high quality, and it's written by a guy called Kotler in marketing, talking about pricing strategy. When you talk about premium in games, I think a lot of people will think that means a paid upfront game, which
yeah,
is not the same meaning and
mm.
has very different consequences. And the reason why I'm making that point is not because I'm a pedantic git, although I am. It's because it changes our whole way of defining what we're doing. If you talk about premium as high quality, high price, as opposed to talking about it as a pay up front game, our whole mindset of what it can do, how we can be intelligent about design, I think completely changes. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I've just started reading the Doom, the Dark Ages reviews that have been
Mm,
dropping, and seen that
yeah.
I think it's £80 at retail, and that
Yeah.
has instantly made me go like, "Ow, that's a lot of money." It's like, is it on
Yeah.
Games Pass?
Yeah. Oh no, exactly, exactly. But I mean, the thing is that that's okay. I think prices and prices. I mean, we can talk about price strategy, but again, I'm coming from this kind of mindset of I'm trying to create a game experience that players are going to want to stay. But my way of defining it is the what is the route map. Whereas I think you're more interested in what are the footsteps.
Hmm.
Is that make
Yeah, I love the nuts and bolts. I always have.
yeah.
How do things fit together? How does this work with that? Um, if the player goes off and does this, how does that impact everything over here?
Yeah.
Um, I've just realised we're doing a podcast and I'm waving my arms around like a crazy thing, but
No, no, because it's video. We do video too. It's all good.
yeah,
It's all good. For those of you who are listening to the audio podcast, Alex is currently waving his hands about, as am I. However, don't worry. You may be missing my awesome hat if you're only on audio, but hopefully you won't miss any of our dulcet tones. Now, one thing you might miss is we're going to be playing with some tools that Alex has made. So if you want to have a good look at what tools he's made, we're basically going to follow through an idea of a I'm going to talk about how I think about game design, but I'm going to ask Alex to show me how he looks at game design. The aim here is I want us to talk about how we can all have different approaches and different techniques to coming about the realization of an idea of games. Before I do that, I wanted to go a little bit further on the language. So one of the things I thought was really interesting was a conversation I had with Ty Kelly, and he was writing a book. He has never finished it. I still think he should because it was really good. He talked about in the opening pages what is game design, and his thing was it's how we save money in game dev. And that's an incredibly reductionist way to put it. But bear with me, trust me, this is a good thing. What he was trying to say is that putting something down on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, using plasticine, using old board game pieces to explore what post-it notes. I mean, I have a fetish for post-it notes. I literally have about 20 packs right above my head right now because of the number of workshops and game dev things I do for fun. Gotta love a post-it note. Um, but to my mind, that's what we're doing. We're making the mistakes in on paper, or in front of us, in our mind, before anyone puts any code down. Now, I love that definition. I'd love to know, your definition of what a game designer does.
I think that's a very good, valid way of looking at game design. To be honest, I always, because I came from that level design background, it was always that level design was kind of like the tires on a car. It's you've got the game and you've got the road and you've got the level design where everything meets in the middle.
Yeah,
And I guess in my head, that's always continually been um, my view of game design. And for those of you listening, I'm picking up my Xbox controller at the minute. So the way I've always approached any system design or game design is always from the the side of what's the player got in their hands, how are they interacting with this, what's going to happen when they press a button. And that's how I've always seen game design, that it's in my head, it's working out the players pressed a button, what did they expect to happen, what actually happened, how do they know that, how do they know what happened. But yeah, saving money, especially in the light of the industry turmoil, certainly in the AAA space at the minute, I think that would be a very good thing. And that does lead into a little bit of the stuff that I'm doing. So as I mentioned, I was at Splash Damage until the start of the year. There was a round of redundancies. I took voluntary, and the company were fantastic in dealing with all that and giving me a little bit of money to be able to boost this thing that I'm doing now, which is the more game stuff, and really trying to give back to the industry to try and work out ways of solidifying how we visualize game development, because some of these games have just got so complex and so massive, and the teams have got so huge. It's so difficult to actually sort of align everybody on a vision quickly, because the old joke that's gone through game design since I started was nobody's going to read the GDD, and I distinctly remember like somebody.
Who's the GDD for anyway? It's for
Well,
me. It's not for you.
I distinctly remember somebody printing out a GDD that I'd written at I think it was like 3 times size, just so that it had more of an impact when they threw it down on the desk in front of an investor. and it's like, you've ruined my formatting. I spent months on that formatting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Well, there's an ongoing debate about that. I mean, I personally think that actually GDD is important. For me, it's the case of making sure I've written out actually what I need to happen and make sure I can communicate it to the developer appropriately. To my mind, it's a requirements process that's about proving that it's right as much as it can before it hits the enemy, the player. Sorry, I don't really think the players are enemies, but you know what I mean. What I found fascinating is when I work with a producer who's good, like my business partner Ella, she and I make fantastic GDDs out of the process when we get the chance to do so, because she calls me on my bullshit. I write things out. I know what I want that thing to do and why, but only when she asks me, "What does that mean?" and I have to explain it, does the document get good.
Yeah. As soon as you can start getting into the specifics of things and really nailing that, and it's very easy to, I say very easy, it's common to just like throw a lot of stuff out and be like, there you go, I've written it. But it's only I usually find that after that first draft of a system or a page or whatever, like if you let it rest for a little while, I tend to use like a screen reader to read it back to me so I can actually listen to what I've written, which is usually quite a good way of like
This is
noticing that
very
you've
familiar.
written
Yeah, yeah.
nonsense.
I don't do that particularly. I have, but I don't tend to do it. But I definitely agree with. There's something when you go and read back, and I end up having arguments with. Why are we doing that? And it's because you wrote it. Oh, did I? Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. um,
So
and then distilling it down to those specifics and trying to get it
yeah,
tighter and neater, and then
yeah,
sending it off to someone. And then the most important thing that I've learned over the years is once somebody's read it. That's terrible grammar, my lord. Once somebody's read it and is about to set off doing the task, ask them to describe it back to you to
yeah.
make sure that you've actually aligned on what's in
Well,
your head, what you've written down, and
this is a technique that when I'm doing requirements properly, I try to insist on, but a number of times I don't end up because time pressures and so on and so forth. My aim is actually, I think I'm right in saying it's a formal print methodology process, which we've thrown away with, we're throwing the baby away with the bathwater, where I do a market requirements document, which is the game design document. Then the person who's going to do the coding does a technical requirements document. And that technical requirements document is an answer to the GDD.
mm-hmm.
It says, this is how I'm going to deliver it. And the reason that is so important, and it so saves time and money, is because at that point, I can understand if that coder has understood what I was trying to make
Mm-hmm.
and why.
Yeah.
And the number of times where somebody has literally just only read half the lines that I've written, or at least it comes across that way. To be honest, they probably read them all and I just didn't explain it very well. But the point is that that gap in conversation between the requirement from a user perspective and the technical implementation is the key gap that helps save or make the game, I would argue, a lot of the time.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, making sure that your team has understood what,
Yeah.
and that you've actually managed to describe what was in your head,
Yeah.
is a skill
Exactly.
that I still keep continually adapting.
Anyone think we were human beings who were, completely inadequate? No, I mean, I think we do practice this a lot, but I think it's always improvement that can be made. So let's do this experiment. So I'm going to talk about kind of like how I try to approach a game, and I'd like to sort of like see if we can then use your tool. We're going to share on screen a little bit of tool to try and see how you would approach the kind of problem. So let's say we're going to make a game. I haven't decided yet what game we're going to make. I'm going to come at it from the first thing I'm looking for. And again, maybe this is partly my definition of what a game designer should be doing. I'm going to try and identify and satisfy a player need. And that phrase comes from marketing. Identify and satisfy consumer needs is the definition of what a marketeer is supposed to do. It was the first lesson I had on my first day of training. I think it's a really interesting way of looking at game design, because if I'm making a game, I need to know who I'm making it for, and it's not good enough to say it's for me. So I'm going to define who the audience is. I'm going to think about those things. So for me, the first thing I would start with is who I'm making it for. I'm then going to be thinking about what journey am I taking them on. Now, I'm coming in it, like you said, I'm coming in from this system. I'm going to try not to use system as a way of describing it. I'm thinking of a flow perspective. And my flows, I tend to look in 3 layers. The core mechanic, the context in which that core mechanic is played, and the cultural environment that we're in while we're playing that. So I mean, I'm going to spend too long if I go into detail explaining those. If anyone wants to know what that model looks like, there's plenty of places where I've talked about it previously. But let's say, we're going to start off with a core mechanic. You've got range combat up on the screen right now. Fantastic. We're going to do range combat. So
Okay.
I'm going to do.
Well, we have multiple options, and like I say, these are all
Yep.
just data table driven. I don't have icons for everything yet, but we can. Right. I mean, I've not actually got who is it for. I've got player emotion. We could potentially start with player emotion.
Emotion is good, but we've got here range combat. Let's chuck in a player emotion. What would the player emotion be?
Right.
Are we talking about skill? Or are we talking about?
I was throwing this together rapidly last night.
Yeah,
so
yeah. It's all right. It's all good.
Do you want your player to be really excited while they're playing it? Do you want them to be nice and calm? Is it chill?
Or is it? I like the idea of this because by the very choice of excited, calm, adrenaline, casual, completely profoundly changes what game we're making, doesn't it?
Yeah. And focused, which I may have spelt wrong. But
lots of S's.
Yeah,
I don't know if it does or not. My spelling's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to bring with this system. So as I said, I'm trying to figure out a way of helping people visualize what the game is, and I'll just quickly like load of blocks in. So you can quickly, anyone that's watching this can see. Anyone that isn't watching this, imagine a series of blocks a la stacking tower game. There's a certain small name for it, but it's copyrighted, so I'm not going to say that. I'll let Oscar say it.
Yeah, we're not going to say the J word. Yeah.
And each block has got a decision on it, which starts off as a question, and then as you design your game, it becomes a decision. Now, from the pragmatic side of things, I look at things like, right, what platform are we going to be on? Defaulted to Nintendo Switch and so on, and how that will then influence so many other decisions down the line. What game engine are you going to use? Things like that. Is it going to be light-hearted? What's your tone? What's your art style going to be? But yeah, so that's.
I'm immediately going in with that. I love that setup. So I'm immediately thinking about now. What are the delivery platforms, and am I doing cross-platform, or am I doing, single platform? Is it online game or not? The moment you put up Switch, I'm thinking, the complications we have currently, I don't know how Switch 2 will work out, but the complications to try to run a live experience on a Switch game is non-trivial. It's not
Hmm.
like a PC console mobile game where it's almost expected that you'll have some server-side component.
Hmm.
So I think, like I say, Switch is a particular example, which is very defined, but it provides you with not just a definition of the functional technical framework, but also an audience framework and the type of business model you can then apply because of the complications of the way the platform operates.
Hmm. But at the same time, Nintendo very wisely pushed the Switch as a really great co-op
Yeah,
device, right?
yeah,
As
yeah.
like,
It's fair.
especially
It's fair.
couch co-op. Stick it in its
Yeah,
TV dock. Each have a controller,
yeah.
and it's great. And sorry, there's a wasp buzzing around. So if you can hear buzzing, it's just because there's a wasp in here. Um, but so and again, these things fit really well together. But yeah, as you said, it's one of the biggest things that I've found with this system is, if you say I want to be on Nintendo Switch and I want to be 64 players and
Yeah,
my art style is going to be realistic, straight away anyone can look at this and go like, well, hang on a minute, that's just not going to work because the Switch
doesn't
isn't
work. Yeah,
powerful enough. And
yeah.
as you said, online 64 player online on Nintendo Switch is not that easy to do. Now on
It's not going to be easy.
On Switch 2, that might be possible. It's
Yeah,
entirely because they're pushing Mario Kart World. Looks really cool. It's a big different take on it. So I think Nintendo are obviously, I'm not going to say playing catch up because I don't think Nintendo work like that, but
no, I agree.
they acknowledge that there's a large portion of the market that wants that kind of a game.
Yeah, and for clarity, I'm not making these statements about Nintendo as a downer on Nintendo. They're a very good market. I'm just trying to highlight that there are constraints as a developer that I'm going to be considering. They bring lots of benefits and particular audience, interest. However, there are consequences to those choices.
Hmm. Yeah, but you wanted to start with a player emotion, right? So
Yeah, so let's
let's.
start with emotion. So I like the excited. I quite like the shooter as being one of those things
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
yeah. We're going to do
Uh,
interaction style, not
I think
not
that's kind
inventory.
of
Yeah.
good.
Okay, so we're going
Um,
to be an
so,
exciting range shooter. What's our art style going to be? Are you
so
early enough for that, or
I tend to not get into art style until I know what kind of like cultural layer I'm after, and it's
okay?
not always the case. So I typically will. I might be thinking about it. So in my core, I'm thinking about functionally what are we doing.
Hmm.
So here, I'm very happy. I've got range combat. So okay, so it's all focused on range combat. It's supposed to be realistic and exciting. So exciting, I'm reading as relatively fast paced, hip firing. I'm thinking almost arcade style would then make more sense. But
Hmm.
we've said realistic. So are we talking about a Tarkov or a kind of
Well, let's do
yeah
stylized 3D then instead,
yeah
or
okay.
or we can. Do you want to go for number of players at this point instead? How many? So you're looking at a multiplayer
So
game.
I think multiplayer. I'm going to say PvE
Okay.
is. I fancy a PvPvE, because I think there's something. I've seen some amazing extraction shooters that
Hmm.
never quite took off. That I always felt there was something there, and I love the idea of games which have tension.
Hmm.
So what I like making, I write a lot of like actual play kind of like tabletop style stuff for fun, because I don't tend to get to make my own video games. I tend to advise on other people's. But the whole idea of having secret dilemmas and stories and things that mean that you're never quite sure whether the person you're facing is on your side or not, there's something really powerful about that. I'd love to see a kind of maybe not extraction shooter, but that kind of collaborative shooter type experience where at some point I might decide actually it's in my best interest to shoot you and be shot by you,
Hmm.
but in other circumstances it's absolutely not, and that could be a tragic mistake. And I think that makes things really interesting. Imagine Among Us meets Hell Divers.
Okay. Have you played the Hunt Showdown? Because that could be
I
really good for
have
that.
not. The
Uh,
Hun Showdown.
the Hunt Showdown. So,
The Hunt Showdown. I will check that out.
which is it? Yeah, PvP, PvP, VE. You're in little teams, It's got amazing sound design. The sound design on that game
Yeah.
is phenomenal. And yeah, you go in and you'll find areas where you want to try and get the thing that you're trying to get. And there's usually a boss of some sort who is really tough and will probably take quite a few of you to take down. And then as soon as you engage with that person, with that enemy, then other teams are going to hear that and probably going to flock. And by the time people know the maps and so on, then they'll have a good idea as to the kind of enemy that you're probably fighting. Again, from the
Yeah.
sound design as well. And then they might probably join in because they know that you're more likely to take this thing down if you're all working together. And then the millisecond that that boss is down, the teams are going to turn on each other because they want the loot, and then they want, or equally, you just let the other team go and hope that they'll just about scrape through and maybe